today. So, and then after she's done speaking, done giving a keynote, we have an opportunity to talk to her through a Q&A and through an inspiration chat, which will be moderated by Kaydian. Right there. Very exciting. And then after that, we'll have our inspiration chat panel, and I will be moderating that one. All right. I think everybody's done. Everybody's followed your hashtag. Everybody, give it up for Judge Laurel Beatty. Blow.
They're Ricky.
All right.
Yes. Okay. Here you go.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, I am not a morning person, so you did real good to get me here. Thank you so much for having me here today. It is always a pleasure. As a judge, you know, trouble is my business. And so it is nice to go out into the community and be able to talk about something encouraging to people who are doing their best to do well. And you know, I've been a judge for 16 years. I spent 10 years in trial court, and I've been on appellate court for 6 years. And you can always tell when you walk into a courtroom, there's an invisible current that tells you whether people are going to be tense, hopeful, or bored. And as a judge, I felt that every day because the energy of a courtroom can shift in a heartbeat. One day, we were in open court, and a lawyer said something so incredibly disrespectful to me. And you could tell the whole room stopped and looked at me to see what my reaction was going to be. And I remember putting my head down, and the people in the room later told me it was like the longest 2 or 3 minutes ever. So I put my head down, and I was just letting all the expletives run through my head. On the outside, I appeared calm, but on the inside, they were flowing through twice. And then I looked up at him, and I just said, "Sir, your disrespect and your insults are unpersuasive." And then you felt the whole room exhale. And what I didn't realize at that time was that everybody was watching to see what I would do, but also to see how I would handle that leadership under pressure. And that's when I really started paying attention to energy, how we attract it, how we block it, and how we match it. Because whether you're in a courtroom, a living room, or your kitchen, energy moves, and it can move through you or it can move from you. So again, just to let you know what I'm talking about. So for that job that I had for 10 years, think Law and Order meets Suits, not so much Judge Judy. And now I had adult felony cases and civil cases over $15,000. I took the bench during the foreclosure crisis. And now I'm in Court of Appeals, so I see every area of law that comes through state court. And trust me that all of these experiences on the bench have taught me more about energy than any yoga class ever could have. Now, when we talk about manifesting energy, there is just a truth. And that is that you attract what you emit. So, if you want to be light, bring light. If you want trust, be trustworthy. If you want genuine connection, make people feel seen and heard. But I also know that most people's impression of court comes, or the justice system period really, comes from TV, right? And that's fair. So when I would start my jury trials, I would try and shift the energy. And what I would do is I would start with like, hey, you know, nothing's gonna be solved in 30 minutes like it is on Judge Judy. And there is no person in a dark room surrounded by computers that can tell us that a speck of dust came from the northwest corner of Broad and High because it was left by a Timberland boot that was only made in 2015 and sold to 20 people. And I waited a long time for one of those detectives to look like LL Cool J. Never happened. And so, you know, starting my jury trial like that would always get a laugh. But what I was doing was shifting the energy so I could make sure that they understood that we weren't dealing with TV. We were dealing with real life, real people, and real consequences. And here in Franklin County, our jury pools come from voter registration lists. So you literally have the 18-year-old that is like marveling at the payphone in the reception area of the courthouse, all the way to retirees, you know, that have been working for 50 years. And then you have people that are so excited to be there and they want to be picked for a jury so bad. And those people after the trials, they always ask if there's a volunteer jury program. But then, look, there's the other side of the spectrum where you have people that are like, look, lady, I am here because you told me you would arrest me if I didn't show up. And my job was to meet all of that energy. Excitement, nerves, irritation, and help them get ready. Because what we ask jurors to do is no small task. We ask them to come downtown and park, to listen to arguments, to watch witnesses, look at exhibits, decide what and who they believe, and then take that and apply it to the law that we give them in the jury instructions. And what I needed them to be ready to do, to have the energy to do, is in a civil case, it's the jury that decides if a plaintiff should recover, and if so, how much. And in a criminal case, it's the jury that decides guilty or not guilty. So I needed them to be ready to have the energy to do that. And that's why humor mattered. Because when people laughed, they breathed. And when they breathed, they could think. Because again, we're dealing with real life, real people, and real consequences. So what I was trying to do was attract good energy by being good energy. And of course, not every room was full of sunshine and rainbows and good energy. You know, some rooms are full of ego, doubt, or negativity. And that's when I protect my power source. When I was appointed to the bench, trust me, it was not celebrated by any stretch. And for the first year or two I was on the bench, I didn't know if people were approaching me with racism, sexism, or ageism. But what I figured out pretty quickly was that the best thing to do was put my head down and do the work. Because the best way in that instance was not to respond, but to outlast. Because energy moves, and so do people. And so those old judges that were there when I started, that would have had us using typewriters and carbon paper to this day. They are gone now. And now me and my peers are the decision makers. And I was grateful that I used that time to prepare, to watch, and to listen. So by the time I had the power, and I was administrative judge, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I knew how to do it. Protecting your energy doesn't necessarily mean building walls. Sometimes it means building endurance. It means knowing what deserves your attention and what doesn't. Because boundaries are batteries. They keep you charged for the work that actually matters. And that lesson, protecting my own charge, is going to lead me into my next topic and even more courthouse stories. Because the next topic is one that is, I think, is hard, and that is matching energy. Matching energy, in my mind, is hard because it requires discernment, and discernment can be hard in the moment. And you can't match everyone because it will make you miserable. If you keep matching chaos with chaos, all you're ever going to get is what? Chaos. And I saw this clip on Instagram the other day, and it had me rolling. This woman was like, when they go low, sometimes I kick them in the face. And, you know, we have all been there. You know, we have all had that temptation. But, you know, in my world of being in a courtroom, that only multiplies chaos. And so that does not work for me. And trust me, judges see every day how matching energy, whether it's anger or lust, keeps us busy. I remember a restraining order hearing I had one time. And this married man had had a one-night stand that had turned into a disaster. This woman was contacting his wife, she was coming to his job, she was doing stuff to his house. It was crazy. And I remember I was reading those facts, and I looked up at that man in the back of the courtroom, and I said, "Sir, there is no way it was worth it." Because there was just no way. And judging by the look on his face, I think that he actually agreed with me. Because the truth is that type of impulsive energy, be it lust or anger or ego, often walked through my doors in the courthouse. And sometimes it looked like heartbreak. And other times it looked like rage. So I remember there was a father in my courtroom, and his daughter had died. And what happened was that her mother had an alcohol problem, and she was trying to cook for the little girl, and she passed out drunk, and the apartment caught on fire, and the little girl died. And he was hot. And then on top of that, he had a child support arrearage. So legally, you guys, he had to continue to pay for a child who had passed away. And he was mad. I thought he was coming after the woman who caused it, and I totally understood why. But in that moment, as the chaos was rising, I sensed that my energy had to get still. The chaos rose, I had to get calm. And my calm had to be louder than his noise. And so I spoke softly and slowly until the temperature in the room dropped. And what that taught me, you all, is that matching energy doesn't necessarily mean mirroring it. Sometimes it means managing it. And sometimes it's not just about emotion, it's about integrity. Another courthouse story. I was presiding over a very racially charged felony murder trial one time. And, there was testimony about Confederate flags and what they symbolized or what they didn't symbolize and all this. And so there was a witness on the stand, and the way that our courthouse is set up, I'm the judge, up there, big robe, and then the witness stand is probably like 2 arms lengths away from me. So she was a white woman, and she was testifying, and to set the stage of what happened during this crime, the prosecutor was asked her, what she did when she saw 2 black men in her basement. Y'all, she looked at the prosecutor, and then she looked at me, and then she looked at the prosecutor, and she said, well, I said, Paul, there's ends in the basement. But she ain't say ends, y'all. She said the word. She said the word. And again, what happened? Everybody looked at me. But you know what? I had to have the awareness that I'm the judge. I'm the referee. And justice cannot hinge on my feelings. And the jury is watching me. So I just looked at her like I looked at any other witness and kept the trial moving. Because it's so important to understand that sometimes what leadership means is absorbing shock. In that instance, I was absorbing the shock of what she said without amplifying it. And in my mind, that's what leadership in a courtroom looks like. And when I left the trial court bench, my going away party was full of prosecutors, public defenders, probation officers, and court staff. And for those of you that don't have anything to do with the law, those are groups of people that sometimes don't agree with me or each other. But to have them all in the same room, wishing me well as I went to the Court of Appeals, it told me that the way I treated people, those little small moments of treating people with respect and dignity, were really stronger than any individual ruling on any case that I had made. Now, don't get me wrong, because I do understand that sometimes you have to match that energy, because sometimes it's the only language that some people understand. But I will remind you that matching energy does not necessarily have to be combative. Matching energy can be matching effort. It can be matching empathy. It can be matching focus. And so the key is knowing which kind of energy to meet and which to rise above and not kicking anybody in the face. But we don't always control the storms around us, but we do control the current within us. So attract energy that builds trust, the kind that reminds people they're seen, heard, and respected. Because if you keep attracting chaos, all you're gonna do is end up in front of a judge like me, and I already have a full docket, friends. Block the energy that drains purpose, whether it's criticism, chaos, or that one coworker that hits reply all just to say, okay, it drives me insane. I don't know about you. And match energy with wisdom, not impulse. Because when you fight fire with fire, or when lust overcomes logic, all you do is give judges like me job security. When you walk into a room, let people feel the difference. A shift towards focus, fairness, and something that feels real. And when you leave, let that same energy keep working long after you're gone. That's not just leadership. That's the charge you leave behind. And so I want to thank you all for letting me share a little bit of my energy today. But I also want you to remember that energy is contagious. So spread the good kind. The world already has enough people out here matching foolishness with foolishness. And so I hope that you all will be the ones who will break the circuit. And if you can't manage your energy, don't worry. People like me stayed employed when you don't. But I would prefer for you to be out here managing your energy and watching your choices. Thank you so much for having me today. I will take those shoes.
They're so cute. They are.
All right, everyone, please join me in giving Judge Laurel Beatty Blunt a round of applause. I know we can do better than that. Everyone enjoying their coffee and snacks and food this morning, so you should be well energized. Woo! Thank you for all of those nuggets that you shared. And I'm just gonna jump right in. So get your questions ready. But my first question I have for you is, you talked about making sure that we show up in the best way possible so we're emitting energy that we want to attract.
Mhm.
But some of us are showing up in spaces where we're not our authentic selves. So what tips can you give the audience members for us to try to show up in the most authentic way so we can emit that good you talked about?
I think that especially for young people, you have to play a long game and a short game. Because your short game is what's going to determine whether, if you can't be your authentic self in a space, your short game is what's going to determine whether you should stay. And if the answer is yes, you could stay, then how are you going to deal with that? And if the answer is no, you should not stay, then where are you going to go? So, but at the same time, I'm not saying, say for example, we're talking about a workplace. I'm not saying that you determine tonight that you can't be your authentic self at work and you go quit tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, first, you have to take a look and say, okay, I can't be my authentic self at work. How do I feel about that? Am I okay not being my authentic myself at work, but I'm my authentic self everywhere else? Some people might be okay with that, and other people aren't, and all of those things are fine. And so then, if you determine, you can't be your authentic self there, and it's time for you to go, then what you have to do is where you are, figure out what you can get from that current place to give you the skills to go somewhere else where you can be your authentic self. Whether going somewhere else means another employer, or going somewhere else means going out on your own.
Thank you for that. And again, a disclaimer here, I'm not an attorney, she is. We are not telling you to quit your job. So don't put that in your notes, don't put it on your notes, we did not give you that guidance today. All right, so jumping around, you mentioned a couple of things, and one thing that stood out to me, you said, when you are, sometimes in situations, people fight situations with fire or lust. And sometimes logic will sometimes just go out the window. How do people deal with that?
Well, that goes back to what I was saying about discernment. And it's so popular right now to say, oh yeah, I'm matching that energy, and it's said in a combative way. But the thing is, when you think about most of the time when you're matching energy, it's very impulsive. It's very much in that moment. And so you end up doing something that feels good right then, but that can have some very serious long-term consequences. And so, the most obvious example, of course, is anger. And you get mad at somebody, you shoot them, or you stab them, or you hit them, or whatever. But I think the little known thing that people don't talk about is that lust piece. So, okay, y'all, look. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with lust. But what I am saying is lust is all good until there's a positive sign on the pregnancy test. Yeah? In some cases. And so then that, you find people who, maybe even sometimes because of lust and it being impulsive and temporary, then you get the plus sign, and now what? So for example, there is a popular myth where people think that there is a correlation between visitation and child support. And it's not. It's two completely different things, different legal standards, different consequences. And so, for example, if somebody has a felony non-support case, meaning they fail to pay their child support, she's not letting me see my kid is not a defense to that. Or if someone is in domestic court being accused of violating a visitation order, he's not paying child support is not a defense to that. And so you see where that impulsive lust now has you in front of me just because somebody looked good on TikTok.
Yeah.
So that's why I say there's nothing wrong with it. You just have to be careful.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And so I'm going to ask one more question before we open it up to the audience. Judge, one thing you mentioned about leadership is that we sometimes have to absorb the shock of things going on.
Mm-hmm.
And over time that can compound, right? So how do you take care of yourself as you're managing that every day? Like, what is your self-care practice? And overall, how do you deal with a lot of that? Because that, we absorb that too as we're taking on a lot of that energy.
Well, as you can tell, I live life on the lighter side. And for me, it's not to each his own. I go to church, and it's interesting. I've always been a really social person, but right now, even that is changing. So I'm kind of even rediscovering what self-care looks like for me. One thing I would share with you all that really helped me, and I hope maybe it helps you too, is one thing, that whole work-life balance thing, I totally threw that out the door. Because, of course, as a judge, when I think of balance, I think of the scales of justice, right? But also, when you think of the scales of justice, think of how hard it is to get that thing to balance. And then think about how, you could put a feather on there and then it goes all out of balance again. And so I don't try and do that anymore. Every day, I just prioritize. I am divorced. I have an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, and my 80-year-old mom lives with me. So every day, I'm just prioritizing. And quite frankly, sometimes, tomorrow, I will prioritize whoever I couldn't prioritize today. But, I would encourage you not only to know yourself well enough to figure out what self-care looks like for you, but also be open to the fact that as you get older, as life changes, what that looks like will also change. Because, for me, for a long time when I was younger, there were very few parties I met that I didn't like. Where now I much prefer smaller groups, one-on-one connection. So just be open to it. Figure it out and then be open to it changing.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. So questions from the audience.
Don't be shy. You have a judge that's unafraid. It doesn't happen often.
All right, in the back.
I kind of piggyback off your question because I was curious on things outside of your career, what helps you create that energy? Or like, what's your power source? And it can be as small or as big, that helps you, yes, protect it, but also be able to show up as the best, calmest version of you that's step in the world.
Two things. One, I would say is music. Yeah, for me, music can change my mood, you know? And, you know, I will be honest with you all, even though I do listen to the clean version, I do love me some Glorilla, girl. I do. Like, there's this one song she has that's like How I Look, and she's like talking about, you know, she's like, how I look, not betting on myself. I'm the recipe, you know? And I'm like, yeah, girl. and I am unashamed about blasting some Glorilla from my minivan. You know? It just is what it is. But at the same time, for me, I also like to be around kids a lot. Because what I noticed especially when I was in the, you know, that trial court judge and I'm seeing rapes and murders and kidnappings and, you know, like it would feel like the innocence of children would kind of fill me back up. And it would just provide a very nice contrast. And these are small things. Also, my sister-in-law, judges have a lot of rules, but we are allowed to help with if our family member owns a company or is running for a campaign. My family, the Beatty family, believes in child labor. And so I'm going somewhere with this. But I have been working for a long time in a family of politicians and small business owners. The judge rules do let me work for help my sister-in-law out with her company. So it's a search firm. So what my point is that all I do is sometimes help her out when she needs reference calls made. And it is a very nice change just to call people and listen to them say nice things about someone else. Because, you know, that's trouble is my business, you know? And, you know, particularly, it's really interesting because when I was on the bench sentencing, you know, hearing witness testimony and everything, I did feel myself getting impacted by that stuff that I was hearing. But it's interesting because I still feel it in Court of Appeals. And Court of Appeals is mostly reading and writing. What it is you write a brief and then each side gets 15 minutes to argue and that's it. But I was like, wow, I'm still feeling the effect of even reading some of this stuff. And so I had to pivot again a little bit because I think what was happening is that, you know, in that trial court, in that law and order scenario, it's moving fast. Court of Appeals is slow. So you have time to think about it, you know? And so in that way, I'm also having to kind of rearrange my coping mechanisms. Because I do enjoy being on the bench and I do feel like I'm helping people. So I want to continue to do it. So I just figured it out.
That's really good. You need to go up here and then we'll take back there the green jacket and then the one next to you.
Okay, so my question just changed a little bit based off of that answer. But I feel like the world is a very dark and complicated place right now. And we have these outside, like, external forces impacting our energy. I'm wondering how you put that aside and show up every day.
I put it aside and then I try and go out and counter it. And what I'm about to say is not a partisan thing. Our social media culture is not conducive to critical thinking. And then on top of that, you add just how much people don't know about how our government works. And that's that's a lot of the misinformation that is out there. And so what do? I go out and tell people, hey, think about this. Think about when you're on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, you're going like this, right? And you might stop, and then someone has 5 seconds to get your attention. Then they might have it for a minute, and then they gotta end with something. An emotion, an action, something, a laugh, whatever. None of that is conducive to critical thinking. None of that is conducive to you at the end of that minute-long video or whatever saying, did that make sense? You know what I mean? So what I do is I'm just talking about it. Because I also don't think that everything doesn't have to be, some big megaphone, million-person event. It can be correcting your neighbor and changing things that way. So I think that if you do feel like things are dark right now, first figure out if you're fueled by being pissed off or if you're fueled by hope. And then you act on one of those. So for me, I'm fueled by hope. So my reaction is going to be, again, to come here and talk to you all about certain things, to go, to schools and talk about certain things. Because having run for election 4 times and being civically engaged, I see just how much people don't know. And it can be scary sometimes. You wanna know something funny though? This one time, as much as I would love for people to say, oh yes, Laurel, I voted for you because I think that you're so smart and you're so fair and you're so impartial. I will never forget the day that someone told me, yeah, your yard sign was in my neighbor's yard and they always keep their grass cut, so I voted for you. Girl, I mean, I don't know how that energy got there. All I needed was that energy to hit that button that said Laurel gets to keep her job.
Thank you so much for that question. One thing I want to chime in and just share as I was listening, one of my coping mechanisms I have is boxing. And I intentionally go on the days when it's the healthiest mechanism that I need to make sure I show up the best way. So we have this saying at Title Boxing, and in no way is this an endorsement for them, but this is what I do when I go there. They actually say, name the bag. I named the bag. It could be a person, a thing, a situation. And they asked me before I leave the gym, did you leave it all on the bag? And if I didn't, one of the coaches might give me an extra 5 minutes, but that is the goal, to leave it on the bag. So when I step outside, I'm a sunshine, I'm who I always want to be. And that doesn't mean I'm always going to be this excited all the time, but this is my natural disposition. But, have those outlets where you can pour it out, get that frustration out, because it does become exhausting if you carry emotions around that you're not processing and sweeping under the rug. And sometimes I would do that just to kind of get through the day. But I find healthy habits like that to, help me manage the energy and all the things that are around going on. So I can fuel myself with what energizes me, like the judge said. All right, back to the green.
Hey. Okay, so a slight plug for Judge Laurel. She does do these TikToks and Instagram. So if you ever want to stroll, she does things that people just breaks down the law in ways that a very comical and educational way. So slight plug for her. But you spoke in your responses to the questions and in your speech about the power of the pivot. Can you speak more to that? So just understanding when you need to pivot, right? So whether that is in your career, whether that's a mindset shift, whether that's an energy shift, right? What is that trigger for you to where you're okay, it's time for me to no longer go this way. It's time for me to pivot and go a different direction.
I think the key to that is self-awareness. Because so say for example, I will use myself. The natural progression that people would assume that I would want to do, I started out in Common Pleas, now I'm in Court of Appeals, and so a lot of people would think that I would want to run for the Ohio Supreme Court. It's kind of like a natural progression, right? But I am self-aware enough to know that that is not a shiny light for me. I have no desire whatsoever to do that. And so that's a pivot that even though people are asking me, encouraging me, it's a pivot I won't make. And so it works the flip too. You know, you have to be self-aware, just like I was talking about at the beginning of this, you guys. You have to be self-aware enough to know when it's time to go. And here's the thing, like, we just assume, you know, we live in this like black and white, good and bad world right now. Just because it's time for you to go doesn't mean anything's wrong with you, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong with them. It just means it's time to go. It's that simple. You know, it doesn't have to mean that, you know, somebody was a bad boyfriend or a bad boss or whatever. It just means it's over and it's time to go. A reason, a season, or a lifetime. Just like a Yarn went out said on Oprah.
Thank you for that. Okay, I think there's a question right, yep, there you go.
First of all, I love you, and I just love hearing you speak. You bring so much love and light into this world, especially with I was going to talk about your little tidbits. I enjoy watching that because the craziness that's happening in this world, my first reaction is just like, oh, but you just kind of really break it down well. My question, I guess, is how do you manage your energy? You probably listen to so many dark stories going home and being able not to overanalyze that or even just want to protect your kids and put them in a bubble and just not let them be out in the world. How do you manage to control that from what you hear every day in the courtrooms, from what you see? How do you separate that from your personal life to not think everything negative about people?
You know, Sandra, I don't always, you know. I really struggled with the case over the summer where what happened was, you know, I will tell you all, if a person that has any type of disability gets in the hands of the wrong partner, I just can't tell you how many ways that can go wrong. In this case, dealt with a woman who, I think she was on the autism spectrum. I can't remember, but she got disability checks, and as part of her benefit, she got an apartment. And wrong boyfriend, and not only did he move in her place, he moved 2 other people in there too. And so she got up the courage and told them to leave. And essentially, Sandra, they ended up killing this woman over 4 days.
Oh my gosh.
And the coroner testimony was very relevant. And so what I found myself doing was having to say, okay, on day 1, the coroner said that they used this type of knife and they stabbed her here. Okay, and then they left. And then on day 2, they came back and they used this type of knife and they stuck it up her rectum and they did this. And then on day, you know what I mean? So I'm going back and forth between the facts and the testimony continuously from a legal lens because, you know, it was relevant to the question of law. And man, it took me a long time to shake it. It took me a long time. And so first of all, I tell myself, it's okay. It's okay to feel the way that you're feeling. And then I try and identify how I'm feeling, because for me, if I can identify the feeling, a lot of times it makes me feel better. You know what I mean? You know how like sometimes you have a problem and even like getting on the path to a solution, like you're not there yet, but just getting on the path to a solution makes you feel better. It's the same kind of premise. So I just was gentle with myself. You know, I think I probably called some friends. And what I've been doing, I've been walking with friends because I was getting like fat, eating and drinking so much with friends. So be careful with yourself. I would also say, you know, whatever works for you as a coping mechanism, you all, no matter how silly or whatever works for you, that's what you do. And then I would also say that my job has absolutely impacted my parenting. But one good piece of information that I can share with people is that I can confirm, you know, in my years on the bench, especially when it's a child victim, I have seen very few stranger crimes. Very few. It's almost always a relative, a coach, a clergy member, a teacher, a band leader, whatever. It's almost always someone that they know. And then, so like my oldest is a daughter. And my first trial after coming back from maternity leave from having her was, it's called gross sexual imposition, which is a really weird name, but it's inappropriate touching is what it is. And my first trial was a little girl that went over her friend's house and the friend's stepdad touched her inappropriately. And I'm 12 weeks postpartum from having a daughter. You know, my kids, they don't spend the night many places at all. Many places at all. And I'm okay with that. It just, you know, I'm like, sorry y'all. It just is what it is from my job. You'll be okay. But, you know, at the same time, I also don't want you to think that, you know, I go to work every day and it's just this horrible, you know, I mean, I do hear a lot of sad stories. It was another really big lesson for me that judges don't fix things. They resolve disputes. Because in a murder case, you can't fix that. You know, if in a medical malpractice case, you can't fix that sometimes. So my job was to resolve the disputes, not to fix people's problems. And that's another way of coping, is to have that realization, because it kind of gives you that boundary of what you can do realistically. So another thing I do, the videos. Because, so what happened, you all, is that I've run for election 4 times now, and Franklin County is so much bigger when you're trying to cover it to keep your job. So I would see just how much people don't know about our government, and just how much people don't know about my branch of government. And so and then one time I went to this high school, you all, for a civics day, and those kids knew nothing about sexting. They didn't know that it can be a crime to make it, it can be a crime to receive it, it can be a third crime to send it. And they're sitting there like, So what did I do? I went home and made a video. And you guys, guess what? The videos are just me going home, picking up my iPhone and saying, hit record. And then I post it. Or before my daughter goes to dance, I make her edit it. Or before my son starts watching wrestling, he has to stack up my books and my stapler. That's my tripod. You know, like people get it so mixed up thinking that if they have a point, if they want to do something, if they want to change something, they got to go out and be Joyce Beatty, my stepmother. You got to run for Congress. No, you don't. Do something nice for your neighbor. Model good behavior to your coworkers. Correct someone if they think Laurel Beatty Blunt isn't the best judge of Franklin County. You know what I mean? Keep it in perspective, you guys. We're living in a weird time.
Yes, thank you for that. So we have time for one more question. We'll go right here.
Okay.
I'm scared, girl. You have been paying attention like so intently. I'm like, ooh, what's this question gonna be?
It'll be good. It'll be good.
Okay.
I'm in a transitionary phase right now in my career and my personal life, and it's called me to reassess my personal advisory board. So it's a concept of like having a mentor, a sponsor, some peers, a financial advisor, just basically how a CEO would have an advisory board. And I want to know, throughout your career, how have you structured and employed your advisory board, if that makes sense?
First, and this is gonna be a little counterintuitive to your question. First, start with yourself. And the reason why I say start with yourself, because then you will know what your strengths and weaknesses are. So you know what you do know and what you don't know. So then when you go to fill your board, you're filling in your gaps. You know what I'm saying? So like, for example, with my board, I'm not afraid of public speaking. So I don't need someone on my board to teach me how to do public speaking. You know what I'm saying? Now, I don't know anything about social media. And so some of my personal board are people a lot younger than me that will say, Laurel, turn your phone when you film. You know what I'm saying? Excuse me. So start with yourself so that you can have a board with the skills that you need to advance yourself.
I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Also, I will say my career has taught me not to judge a book by its cover or pinhole people, because, when I took the bench, there had been Janet Jackson and Yvette McGee-Brown and Patsy Thomas. But I did not have any current Black women on my court. And what I have learned along the way is that there are people who are my demographic twins that I can't stand. And then there are people who are my demographic opposites that I learned a lot from. So, and this is irrelevant, I'm only bringing this up to make my point. So for example, I am a Black woman that has been endorsed by the Democratic Party. One of the judges that I served with, that I learned the most from, was a white male endorsed by the Republican Party. Had I restricted myself to people who were like me, one, I would have been by myself because nobody was on the bench like me at the time, right? And then two, I would not have had the benefit of everything I learned from that other person because I was closed off because of his party, his gender, or the color of his skin. And I'm so glad that I didn't do that. Because one of the values of, so the judge's name, his name was Bill Clatt, he's still my buddy. And of talking through cases with Bill was sometimes it changed my mind and sometimes it reinforced what I already thought. Either way, I was thinking. And like my videos, what I'm trying to do, I am trying to share information, but I'm also reminding people to think. And so when you're doing your revamp, and you might do another one in 5 years, you might do another one in 10 years. Start with yourself, okay? And then be open to whoever might fill the spots that you need.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Judge. And again, I just want to recap of many of the nuggets. I was taking copious notes, everyone, but many of the things that Judge shared today about attracting energy that we want to, matching energy, but not always in the sense of being cognitive, but being aware and in tune with what's in the space and what's needed and blocking energy. We hope that some of these nuggets will resonate with you, not only right now in this moment, but throughout the rest of your day and your leadership journey. And I just want to tell you, thank you, Judge, for reminding us that who we are right now in this very moment is enough.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the opportunity to nurture ourselves in the way that we need to show better best. So again, everyone, please join me in thanking the Judge.
Okay, so now we go to a coffee break,
Yep.
and then we'll come back here at 10:15.